Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Top 10 players on this Florida State roster heading into the 2024 season. This list was one extremely fun to put together, but more importantly, extremely difficult. The Florida State fans know who've been listening for the last couple of months and weeks. I am a massive fan of this program heading into 2024. And although arguably doesn't have that top end NFL talent that you had last year with guys like Jared Verse and Keon Coleman, I think this is a more complete and deeper team than we saw in 2023. A lot of talent on this roster. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Florida State fans. It's been just a blast talking this program, whether we're talking the portal, the high school recruiting trail, but more importantly, the amount of support the Florida State fans continue to show to the fellas. It truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, I would love to get some top 10 lists from you guys in the comment section. I left some names that I like off this list. Many of you guys might disagree. Let it fly in the comment section. I learned a ton from you guys. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And coming in at number 10, safety Shyheim Brown. And I think where you want to start with a guy like Shyheim Brown is he is, kind of that chess piece in this Florida State defense. You turn on the film from 2023, so many different responsibilities and positions Florida State would put him in, right? He played over 300 snaps as a box defender, 300 snaps as a free safety. He can hold up in coverage, face 14 targets, only gave up 7 catches. He tackles exceptionally well in space with only 10% missed tackle rate. When you have a chess piece like Shyheim Brown that allows you to kind of get that athleticism and coverage ability on the field, but also, be a force in the run game, be able to be that third linebacker at times. That is such a valuable kind of player for this Florida State defense. Shyheim Brown not necessarily lights up the box score, but a guy that is integral and vital in this Florida State defense. I'm a big fan of what Shyheim Brown brings to the table going into number 9. And, another player that I kind of just think is flying under the radar in the landscape of college football, that is DJ Lundy, excuse me. You take a look at linebackers that are just hammers at stopping the run. There's not many better than a guy like DJ Lundy, right? Third on the team in tackles with 54, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, gets his hands on some footballs too, 4 passes defended. The number I love the most, 3.4% missed tackle rate. That is exceptionally high for that linebacker position. 24 run stops, that led the team. And you look at this Florida State linebacker room, you don't have a ton of experience. I think you did a really good job bringing in a guy like Cam Riley, but I look at this Florida State linebacker room and say, you lose guys like Deloach and Bethune. You look at the leader in that linebacker room, it's going to be DJ Lundy, who, again, I thought played exceptional football for Florida State in 2023, just kind of got overshadowed by some other really good linebackers. Many of you guys know I'm a massive fan of DJ Lundy. Also a very good pass rush rate, 20% pass rush win rate when they decide to send DJ Lundy as a pass rusher. One of the best linebackers stopping the run in the country. Number 9 player on Florida State going into number 8, and that's going to be DJU. And DJU was a really tough one in terms of where I wanted to slot him in. And I'll kind of start with this. I think DJU has the potential to be a top 5 player on this Florida State roster, right? You've seen him play some exceptionally good football during his career. I thought he had his best season during his career at Oregon State. We all know what Mike Norvell can do with a quarterback in terms of development. In terms of developmental track record, Mike Norvell has showed with the quarterback position. You look at a guy like Jordan Travis and say, hey, DJU has one of the more talented arms that you're going to see in college football. I think he allows Florida State to attack down the field a little bit better. One of the things I was kind of doing some research on DJU, a 43% completion percentage going 20 plus yards down the field. That is going to add another element to this Florida State offense. And we talk about some wide receivers that they have, whether it's a guy like Hakeem Williams with just a massive physical frame that can work vertically down the field. You talk about some of the speedsters, guys like Malik Benson running a 10-4 in the 100-meter dash. I think you're going to see Florida State ask DJU to really push that ball down the field. And quite frankly, he's one of those quarterbacks that you can ask him to make those kind of throws because he has the arm talent to be able to do that. You can't say that with a lot of other quarterbacks in the 2024 season. I think it comes down to consistency. And if you can clean up some of those small mistakes that you've seen DJU kind of, get plagued with during his time at Clemson and a little bit at Oregon State, you're looking at a quarterback that, really can be one of the better quarterbacks in the country in 2024 if he does, in fact, put it all together. Going to number 7, I'm going to go to Joshua Farmer, who I can see a lot of Florida State fans saying he should be higher on this list. Josh Farmer played exceptionally well during the first 6 games of the season. I thought the production, I thought the impact that he had probably tapered off towards the back half of the season. If you get Josh Farmer for all 13, 14 games that you saw during the first 4 or 5 in that 2023 year, you're looking at a really dominant interior defensive lineman. You take a look at some of the numbers: 32 tackles, that was top 12 on the team, 7 tackles for a loss, 5 sacks, 7.8% pass rush win rate. That is a pretty damn good number from an interior defensive lineman. Was a second team all ACC guy. I think a lot of Florida State fans would probably agree that Joshua Farmer, if he can kind of maintain that level of dominance throughout a 12-game season, that is what you're looking for with a guy like Joshua Farmer going into number 6. And this is a little bit of a projection, right? Malik Benson, you take a look at the 2023 stats at Alabama: 13 catches for 162 yards, 1 touchdown. I think a lot of people look at this and say, well, why do you have him as the number 6 player on this Florida State roster? It's the traits. I'm going to bet on the upside that Malik Benson has, and he's put it on the field. You take a look at the JUCO numbers, 2 years at the JUCO ranks, over 100 catches for over 2,200 yards, 21 touchdowns. This is a big physical frame that is one of the fastest players in all of college football. From a physical trait standpoint, Malik Benson checks just about every single box that you want. And when you read the spring practice notes, you take a look at the spring game, you kind of get the feel that Malik Benson is going to be the wide receiver 1 in this Florida State offense. We've seen transfer wide receivers come in and have a lot of success in terms of coming into Florida State, guys like Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman. If you can see Malik Benson kind of realize the potential that he has, you are looking at a wide receiver with so much upside in that wide receiver room. And I think that's what, kind of makes this Florida State wide receiver room so exciting, is there are so many guys like Malik Benson who haven't necessarily put it all together Saturdays in the fall, but wide receivers that have all the potential in the world. You talk about Malik Benson, you talk about a guy like Hakeem Williams, all guys with a ton of potential for this Florida State wide receiver room going into number 5. And kind of one of my personal favorites, and I think this might be a little bit higher than a lot of Florida State fans would have it, I'm going to go with Sione Lolea. This was a guy that was a second-team All-Pac-12 guy last year, and you take a look at, some of the edge rushers that were in the Pac-12 last year, there were some really, really good players. Sione Lolea, up at Oregon State, was one of the better defenders that you saw in the Pac-12 last year. Now, you look at the box score and say 47 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Those are extremely solid numbers. They're not necessarily numbers that you're going to write home about. You turn on the film and you realize how good Sione Lolea is at the point of attack, being a force in the run game, collapse in pockets. This is a guy that is much more disruptive than the box scores will kind of show you, right? 21 run stops, 27 quarterback hurries. Those are some of the numbers that kind of give you that in-depth look of how dominant Sione Lolea was at Oregon State last year. Heavy hands, plays with exceptional pad level. I think this is one of the better edge rushers that you see not only in the ACC, but in the country. And I think being at Florida State, being on a team that's going to be competing for a conference championship, I think more people are going to get familiar with the name Sione Lolea during the 2024 season, going up to number 4. I'm going to go with Darius Washington. And Darius Washington, I think, played banged up for a majority of that 2023 season. Exceptional football player for Florida State. And I think anytime he was a first-team All-ACC guy, he's played over 2,300 snaps during his career. Anytime you're talking about a guy that has played left tackle, right tackle, center, has that versatility, that is so valuable in terms of getting your best 5 on the offensive line. You take a look at the left tackle numbers, only 7 quarterback hurries allowed, 1 sack. Darius Washington was one of the better tackles you saw in the ACC, a guy that probably would have been a day 3 NFL draft pick had he wanted to declare one of the better returning offensive linemen in the ACC. I think he is kind of the centerpiece of this Florida State offensive line. And again, the versatility is something that really stands out to me about a guy like Darius Washington. Going up to number 3, and I'm going to go Patrick Payton. And Patrick Payton's another guy that I think the upside on Patrick Payton is so high. You are looking at one of the better pure pass rushers in college football, 32 quarterback hurries, 14 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks. I think what's really exciting about Patrick Payton is he came to Florida State as a developmental prospect, right? He played a lot of off-ball linebacker coming out of high school, made that transition to that edge rusher role, redshirted as a freshman, played really well as a redshirt freshman, took another step going into his 3rd year. And I think a lot of Florida State fans are saying, what happens if Patrick Payton takes another step heading into 2024, going into his 4th year? This is a guy that has gotten better every single year he's been in Tallahassee. And I think this is a guy that you point to and say, a lot of people like to rag on the development at Florida State and say, oh, they have to get all their guys from the transfer portal. You look at a guy like Patrick Payton and say, look no further from a guy that came in as just a raw prospect, has been developed into one of the better pass rushers that you see in the country. And I think for Patrick Payton to take that last step, a little bit more physicality in the run game, taking on blocks, keeping that outside shoulder free. If you see him put that together going into year 4, you are looking at a dominant edge rusher for the Florida State Seminoles. Going up to number 2, Ventrell Cypress. And I think you guys know who the number 1 player is going to be as well. Talk about Ventrell Cypress at first. Coming over from Virginia, was exceptional on Virginia in 2022. Was very good for Florida State in 2023 as well. You take a look, 40 tackles, 8 passes defended, faced 52 targets, only gave up 22 catches. That's a 50% completion percentage when targeted. Career 22 passes defended, 1 interception. You are looking at an NFL caliber cornerback that has decided to come back to Florida State for one more year. And then you go to number 1 and say, for the Florida State fans that are in touch with spring practice and watched a lot of Florida State in 2023, A.Z. Thomas was so good for Florida State in 2023. Then you read the spring practice notes and say, A.Z. Thomas is a guy that could potentially go top 20 in the NFL draft. You might be looking at one of the best cornerbacks in the country. That's coming from a Michigan fan. That's coming from a Will Johnson fan. A.Z. Thomas was so good last year. This Florida State Seminoles secondary is going to be so good in 2024. I think it's bookend by A.Z. Thomas and Ventrell Cypress. You look at that nickel spot, and it sounds like Earl Little kind of chased Greedy Vance off. And Greedy Vance, I thought, was exceptional at that nickel role for Florida State last year. You're talking about Earl Little coming in from Alabama and kind of pushing off Greedy Vance. I think that tells you how good Earl Little did in spring practice. You look at some of the names that I left off the top 10 list that I really tried to get in. 1, Marvin Jones coming from Georgia. I don't think there was enough there for me to put him in the top 10. That is a guy in Marvin Jones who we might be talking about being a top 5 player on this Florida State team come middle of October, getting into early November. You look at a guy like Jalen Lucas, kind of that dynamic weapon that can play slot wide receiver, that can be a weapon in the backfield. He's a guy that has sounded to be one of the kind of foundational weapons in this Florida State offense during spring practice. I think Roydell Williams was another name that I wanted to include in this list. And I think that gets to the point that we kind of started from in the top, and that is this Florida State team, although might not have that bona fide top 20 pick like guys like Jared Verse last year or Keon Coleman, who ended up going in early in the second round, which was wild. I think this Florida State team is deeper than it was last year. There were 15, 16, 17 names that I was trying to fit into this top 10 and just couldn't fit in. I think that tells you how deep this Florida State team is heading into 2024. Those are my top 10. Would love to hear your top 10 in the comments section. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.